So good morning, everybody. My name is Dan Krieger. I run the Center's Diversity and Inclusion Program, and I'm really excited to be here in front of you and welcome you to Juan's journey around the world. I'm really flattered that Juan and Julie and Javier asked me to be up here to kind of kick things off. I've actually known Juan since he started here at Goddard, and I was actually in communication with him before, during, and after the trip, but I haven't seen the presentation that you're going to see, so I'm going to be just as surprised and amazed to hear about what happened during that 1 year as you are. Kind of ironic, I'm born and raised in Greenbelt, Maryland, where you are right now, and I've spent my entire life either living or working in this city. So the fact that I'm introducing Juan, who's just been on an amazing journey around the world, there's some irony in that. But in my life, BC, before children, I actually have been to more than 50 countries. So for those of you who don't have children and want to do it now, get it out of the way before they take all your money and your time. But it's amazing how it really changes your perspective. And just kind of using an analogy, sometimes you'll hear an astronaut standing right here and talking about their journey into space and showing the Earth from the space station or from the space shuttle. And it just puts things in perspective. And when you go to another country and when you experience another culture, it really puts things in perspective. How great we have things here, how much we have to learn from other cultures and from other people, and really just the benefits and the strength of diversity and talking to people, getting to know them, hearing their stories, because we can learn so much by just kind of opening our minds and our hearts to other people and being open to that. So. This activity is being sponsored by two very respected organizations here at Goddard. One is the Hispanic Advisory Committee for Employees, or ASE, which was formed back in 1991 by then Senator Director John Kleinberg. For any of you who were here back then, like me, I was a founding member of ASE. And their goal is really to recruit, hire, retain, and develop our Hispanic community, as well as to bring up issues that impact our Hispanic population. And what you find is that things that impact one group often impact a much larger group. So even though their focus is on a specific segment of our population, the benefits really are reaped by everybody. The other group is the First Line Supervisors Resource Group. As I was talking to Juan about, being a supervisor here is one of the most challenging yet rewarding jobs there is. And we have a group that provides support and insight and collaboration for our supervisory workforce as well. With that, let me introduce Dan Butler, who is a member of the First Line Supervisor Resource Group. It also happens to be Juan's supervisor.
Buenos dias. Thanks, Dan. And that's as much Spanish as you'll get out of me for today. Anyways, thanks for attending today's talk by Juan. I'm the branch head of the Thermal Engineering Branch Code 545, where Juan works, and I'm also a member of the First Line Supervisors Resource Group, which is composed of essentially First Line supervisors from across the center. And the purpose is to leverage the best practices and opportunities for improved organizational functioning at the center. In other words, we're trying to make our lives a little easier, not only for us, but for those of us that work here. And to assist in fostering a diverse work environment for the Goddard workforce. So one of our activities is to work with the various advisory committees at the center, and I'm assigned to be a member of the HASE Hispanic group. Also, I'm kind of a member of the group by in-law, because as you know, my wife is from Puerto Rico, and so I've gone there every year for a number of years, so it's kind of like my home away from home. So anyways, during a meeting with HASE, we discussed the fact that Juan had taken this 1 year sabbatical, and he'd given us a discussion at the branch level of what his journey was about. And it just sounded like it would be of interest to others in the community. So I'm sure you'll enjoy his talk as we did. But before we get there, I just want to mention that, there's a number of issues that have to be considered if you want to do something similar. I mean, a lot of us were jealous to say, well, Juan, I think this is a great idea. I'm going to retire early and go with you. That's the only time I saw Juan really get worried, but I was just joking. So anyways, when you do this, you have to write a justification. You got to get approvals all the way up at the directorate level. So it's not quite as trivial as just like turning in your time card. But But, you know, Juan had reached a point in his life where he felt an urgent need to pursue this journey, and he'll give you more details on that. And also, he had just wrapped up his work on GPM, and so the center workload was scaling back a little bit, and so the time was right not only for Juan, but also it worked well for, you know, for the center as well. But he had to consider a number of issues in doing this. Things like, well, gee, my health insurance is no good overseas. Also, his cell phone wouldn't work over there. What are you going to do for communication? He went on leave without pay, so there was this minor issue of, do I have enough money to do this for a number of months? And also, you know, how does this affect my retirement, my, you know, seniority and that sort of thing? But in spite of all this, Juan persevered, and because he felt it was the right thing to do. So, in my opinion, one of the major benefits of Juan's journey was the interaction with people and cultures from all over the world in their environment, not necessarily in ours. So I think has provided Juan with a perspective on life that is rare and has allowed him to improve his capabilities in his work here at Goddard. You know, a lot of folks talk the talk about diversity and seeing all their cultures, but Juan has literally walked the walk, and he'll tell you about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I also want to recognize all of Juan's friends who don't work here, who came for this talk. Can I just see by a show of hands how many people are here who don't work here? Excellent. Well, thank you and welcome. We're really excited that you joined us here. And also, his family is here with us. His Aunt Minerva and his sister Veronica are here as well. So welcome. And without any further ado, let me introduce Juan. Let me read a couple words about him. Juan Edilio Rodriguez Ruiz has worked in the thermal engineering branch at NASA Goddard since 2005. He is from Puerto Rico. I'll pause. Thank you. And has a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Puerto Rico, Recinto Universitario de Mayagüez. He worked on the GPM, or Global Precipitation Measurement Mission, for over 5 years, and one of his highlights during his world travels was to watch it launch while he was in India. He has also been involved with LRO, the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, WFIRST, which I don't know the acronym, but bear with me on that one, and CubeSats. In addition to the technical work, he enjoys participating in education and outreach events, mentoring college summer interns, dancing, laughing, and drinking coffee. With that, Juan.
Thank you, Dan. Ten years ago, this was the size of a tumor inside of me. I was 21 years old, I had cancer, and I had to face the reality that one day I am going to die. Even though I had a positive attitude, I was not prepared for how it would deteriorate my body. Things that we take for granted, like sleeping, eating, and breathing, I couldn't do like normal people. I had trouble breathing because the chemotherapy was intoxicating my lungs. I couldn't sleep because chemotherapy was so destructive. I couldn't relax, and I couldn't eat because it was constant indigestion. And I got so weak that I remember one day feeling so embarrassed. I was out with my aunt having dinner with some of her friends, and I was so weak that I couldn't even cut the steak, and I had to ask her to cut the steak for me. So in a ways, I was very limited as a human being. After going through chemotherapy for 6 months, I got rid of this baby, and I've been in remission since. Now, why do I share that? I share that because after that experience and facing the reality of death, some questions became very important for me. Is there more to life than just not being dead? What does it mean to be alive? Then as the years progressed and I went ahead and got started in my career, how I pursued life was a lot about being the center of attention and accomplishing great things. It was about an image. 2010, I went through a wonderful leadership training program called NASA First. And in that program, they assign you a coach that's with you throughout the whole year. And he observed the way I acted. And he said, yes, you can be the life of the party acting this way the whole time, but you are limiting your capacity as a human being. And that was a wake-up call because I realized maybe this way I was pursuing life, there was something false. It was based on an image about how others would perceive me. Around that time, there was a Bible verse that really spoke to me. And it said, when Jesus said, I have come that you may have life, life in all its fullness. Because I realized that the way I was pursuing life, there was a lot of anxiety and emptiness. And I wanted that fullness of life. And I knew in my heart that it was worth the pursuit. Then I remember I used to have this dream of traveling long term. So I decided I'm going to explore that for a year. It was not an easy thing to explore. Not so much because of all that you have to plan, budget, being without an income, where to go, how to get there, what to pack. But what was really difficult for me was what I had to leave behind. Because unlike a 2-week vacation where you can pause your life, here you really have to leave things behind. And I had a car, I had a house, which also comes with a mortgage. And I was also living with my sister, so I was feeling kind of bad. I would have to kick her out of the house in order to rent it. My sister's here. Vero, I'm really sorry I kicked you out 2 years ago. Are you okay now? Okay, good. That's done. Bridge under the water. But I was also concerned about my reputation here. Would people regard me as being lazy, irresponsible, and not caring about the job for doing this? And after considering this, I knew that I couldn't be well with myself if I did not try. So then I spent a year planning the practical details. Eventually, I had to tell the people, my family, my supervisor, their reactions. But that's another talk. And my computer locked the screen. Okay. But then it became a reality, and I bought a one-way ticket to Spain, and I would begin this journey. So this is a story about the pursuit of life to the fullest. And we're going to journey together the same places I went through, and we're going to be making 6 stops in places I believe I found fullness of life. So it was spring of 2013 when I began, and my first stop was in Spain. I was going to start a walking pilgrimage called the Camino de Santiago. It's existed for over 1,000 years. I would walk about 40 days I would actually take a train and start in Lourdes, France, and walk all the way to Santiago de Compostela. That would take me 40 days. It would be about 1,000 kilometers. And to give you space people an idea of scales, 1,000 kilometers is like going 2.5 times to low Earth orbit. The people who come here from the outside are like, woo, what does that mean? So I began, and this is where I began in Lourdes, France. And this is me in full gear. I have the backpack, I have the trekking poles, I have my Camino beard. If you're going to do the Camino, you need to have a Camino beard, unless you're a woman. But for a second, try to imagine being here. Because we tend to live life at the pace of cars. Imagine life at the pace of our footsteps. We are surrounded by entertainment. Imagine just being in silence. There's a lot of noise. Imagine just being with nature. There's a lot of people around us. Imagine just being alone. It's a quite unique experience, especially you do it day after day. And for me, starting in France, where I couldn't speak with people, it was particularly concerning because when I got lost, I couldn't even ask for directions because I didn't know French. But in addition to imagining, we can also see it.
A chance of how it looks like when you're walking the Camino. This is in the French Pyrenees. Good. And the Beautiful view. Murr.
When I was walking, I was alone, so I didn't have many friends. So I kind of had to talk to the animals, the cows and the dogs. I was mostly running away from the dogs, though, because they're kind of mean. And so I would walk 6 to 8 hours every day, get to a small village before nightfall, and then find where they're hosting pilgrims. Pilgrims are hosted in a place called an albergue. An albergue, think of it, it's hostel, but that caters to pilgrims. It's very basic accommodation. You get to stay there one night, usually bunk beds. The next day, you wake up and you go. It's not a place where people can stay very often. So don't think of it in the terms of a hostel here in the US or even in Europe. So the albergue, and this is one of the more interesting ones I stated. This is what you carry around, the pilgrim's credential. So every place you stay, they keep stamping it. So by the end, I had about 40 stamps. And then I crossed over across the Pyrenees from France into Spain, and something changed. People showed up. So I had these 8 days of serenity, and all of a sudden, there's hundreds of people on the path, because I got to a point where it's very popular from people all over the world to start their pilgrimage. So it was very fun and exciting. You get to meet people from many different countries. You build relationships. And one unexpected benefit that would come out of that is eventually some of the people that I would meet in the Camino would host me as I continued my travels. Like these 2 women were from Brazil, and I actually visited them and stayed with them, knew their family. And then I also visited her family in South Korea later on. But the focus was different now, because it was all about getting early to the albergue so you can get together with the people you like. You could go have dinner together, go to the bar and play with swords. And it seemed more of a cruise ship and less of a pilgrimage. About a week after that, I was running behind to the albergue that I wanted to get to, that I knew my friends are going to be at. And I called the albergue, and I tell them, could you please reserve a bed for me? I don't want to be without a bed. And they tell me, we're sorry, this is a donation-based albergue. It's first come, first served. So I hang up, and then I call my friends who are already there. Please go to the albergue and beg them to reserve a bed for me. Then they will call me back, and they say that they did convince them based on the misinformation that I was 20 minutes away. I was an hour away, but because I was close to getting blisters, 2 hours later, I get to the albergue, and there's this lobby type area, and I see that they're talking to a woman, another pilgrim, and they're telling her, we're sorry, there are no more beds. We've called every other albergue in town, and they're all full. You're going to have to walk to the next place or take a taxi. Then she kind of moved to the side, and I went up. My name is Juan Rodriguez, and I have a bed reserved. And they did. And they start registering my papers, but I looked to the side to where this woman was. And she was clearly out of shape, visibly exhausted, and she had a look of despair on her face that I will never forget, because that night I took the bed of someone who needed it more than me. There was something wrong in this Camino. And 2 days later, I'm all irritated and angry, and I'm running to an albergue because I had just stayed in the hippie house of smiles, where you're greeted with candy put on the bed, so I never ventured to eat that. But I was irritated because I didn't get to stay where I wanted, and I wanted to stay in this place where people say you can have a cool experience. So I was rushing, and embarrassingly enough, I'm the first pilgrim to get registered. But then the man who welcomes me in that albergue, Jose Luis, when I get in, I feel a sense of peace and welcome that I hadn't felt anywhere else. And a few hours later, he who was a pilgrim, he walked the Camino 30 years ago and walked it multiple times, starts sharing how the Camino has changed. Because many people this day, there's a kind of disease where people are just waking up at the crack of dawn and they're just rushing to get to the albergues by noon. Then they spend the whole day in the albergues, and they're missing the point, because the Camino is not about the albergues, but it is about being out in the fields, in the sun, experiencing what the Camino wants to offer you, not what you want from it. And this was a really wake-up call to me, because I realized that my experience so far was about my Camino, and my experience, and I was missing the point, and I was taking other people's bets. So this taught me that fullness of life is found in releasing control and being open to what the journey has to offer. These key insights would completely transform my Camino to the point that the second half would be barely recognizable from the first half. And this is about stopping to trying to predict every little aspect that comes ahead in our life and being open to the outcome. And then I had my first chance to practice this insight, because this place, there's many places in the Camino where you get to fill up your water bottle, but this place gives you a choice. You have water on the right and wine on the left. I'm open to outcome. This is what the Camino wants to offer me. So I got the wine. That day I didn't walk a lot. Got to the next village. But eventually, 40 days into it, I got to the goal of the Camino. And then I had to move on. So I went then to Portugal, which is the first place where I was hosted by some of my Camino connections. And then I was going to do the most exciting thing. I was going to come here and going to get a sailing boat and sail the Mediterranean for a few weeks. But that was not what my heart was telling me. That's what I had planned, but my heart was telling me, go back to the albergue where you had this powerful experience. Not as a pilgrim, but go back to serve other pilgrims. And after discerning it and thinking about it for a few days, I called the host and I told Jose Luis, I would like to volunteer, but I only have these 3 weeks before I have to go to Morocco. And he told me, much to my surprise, those are exactly the 3 weeks that I need help. So I went, and now we're about June time frame. And one thing that may be hard to believe is that as I was here serving in a role of hospitality, I found that more tiring than walking every day 25 to 30 kilometers. I think part of it because some of the responsibilities are to welcome the pilgrims, care for them. A lot of them get to the albergue very hurt, prepare food for them, and also every day you have to kind of clean everything up and clean up the toilets, which I got tired of. So this is a key to the house, very big key, very thick door. You feel like you're entering into the 12th century when you push that door out. And this is Jose Luis, and this is another pilgrim. And we didn't have a car, and we were in a very small village of about 10 houses. So we had to walk to the next town when we needed to get grocery stores, about 4 to 5 kilometers. Which is okay because they say it's good for your cholesterol. This is how the dinner scene would look like with people eating. We would have like a Thanksgiving ceremony to start, then people just get to know each other. Jose Luis liked to encourage people to sing songs from their countries, which was quite fun to do. And this is where they sleep. Very basic, no pillows. And this is the prayer room we had. We always have an evening prayer experience for people, which was very powerful. Then I went to Morocco. First African country I've ever been to, first Muslim country I've been to. This is the largest mosque in Morocco. This is the first and only time in my travels that I would be traveling with a companion. This is Stephanie Walter. I actually met her when I was diagnosed with cancer, and she kind of helped take care of me, take me to the chemotherapy treatments. So it was good to see her again. And we also had the wonderful opportunity to stay with a local Moroccan family for a few days. This is the mother of the family, and this is Steffi. She is not Moroccan. And we went there during an interesting time unintentionally. It was the month of Ramadan, which is a very holy month in Islam. And they fast from sun up to sundown from all food and from all drinks, including water. Now, Morocco is desert environment. It's very hot. So you can imagine how difficult it would be. And being with the family, we got a really unique perspective because since this is a Muslim majority country, they actually have a siren that they sound when the official fasting time ends at sundown. So about 15 minutes before it's roughly gonna sound, everybody's gathered around the table. And those are the 15 most tense minutes of your life. You do not want to start small talk with those people after they spend a day and they're just waiting, counting the seconds. But it was quite interesting. Then we went to the Sahara Desert. That's where we spent the night. This is a view. And that's our guide. Now, one interesting thing about traveling with a companion is that they can actually capture candid moments that I couldn't do when I'm traveling on my own. So I'm going to share a few of those. So this is a taxi driver we hired to be our tour guide in Casablanca. And you see I'm perplexed because he's about to propose to me. That was not true. He's actually teaching me how to pray in Islam. So I was asking him to teach me. Well, that was a nice shot. This is a scene that happened a lot because traveling on my own, didn't always have a table to eat. So sometimes I would just have to find a place on the street, get the snacks, sit down, and just eat. And then this is me with a tummy ache. Yeah. This is me having a really, really bad day. Those kind of days where you're like, oh, life doesn't make sense. I'm such a failure. I made so many mistakes. It was all doom and gloom. And I show this because sometimes we think of travel as so glamorous. There's so many exciting things. But a lot of the time, this was the guy you would meet, this grouch monster. And then this is me rolling down the sand dunes. I encourage everybody to do that. So now this was about 3 to 4 months, and then I crossed the ocean to South America, which I was very excited about because I've never been. And first spot is Brazil. Now I went there for an event called World Youth Day. So this is the famous monument of Jesus in Rio de Janeiro. So World Youth Day is an event that every 2 or 3 years, Pope Francis would go to a different country. He invites people ages, under 35. And from all over the world, and they spent a week together. And it's a high energy environment because there's over 3 million extra people in the city from all continents, all countries. And this is just meant to capture that sense of the energy. And this is as close as I got to Pope Francis, and that's the back of his head. I know, I try to get my money back because I didn't get a good shot. But that didn't work with the Vatican very well. One aspect about the experience there is that the local churches find local accommodation for you. And I was placed in what they call a favela. A favela is one of the what we call Brazilian slums. And before I talk a little bit about that, I want to pan out. And I want to share what I wanted to do in Brazil. Because my plan was to spend 2 or 3 weeks, because I didn't know Portuguese. I didn't want to spend too much time there. So I wanted to go to Argentina, buy a motorcycle, a used one, and then travel through Argentina, Bolivia, Peru, and down to Chile for several months. But then something would happen in this favela that would completely change that and would take me the opposite direction. And I didn't know it would continue to extend my time in Brazil, so that's why I put July to unknown. Because in that place, the people not only started welcoming me into their homes, but they started welcoming me into their lives. This is us having a Sunday brunch together. And that's some of the children. I remember this guy I would take to Boy Scouts. And they would start entrusting me to all these little details of ordinary life that you normally don't get to experience when you're traveling. And then what would happen is that as I continued to move to other cities in Brazil, these kind of doors would continue to keep opening up. Here is in Sao Paulo as we're celebrating the birthday of Tia Chica. And then that's me playing soccer barefoot on gravel, which is very painful. But playing with Brazilians, it really means I become the laughingstock because they're so good. And it was really impactful because they opened their hand and they were just so generous, not expecting anything. So this pattern would continue. And I thought I was going to go south, but I actually ended up going opposite direction. So here I am in Recife, where I stay with a religious community. Now, a very interesting thing, from my perspective, when I think of a monk or a nun, I think of a very old person who's in a monastery praying. But here, every single monk and nun was younger than I was, even the head of the local place. And they devote their lives to the poor. This is a man who was crawling himself on the metro trying to get out, and he picks him up and just carry him. And then this is a rehabilitation house, so all these men here are struggling, well, not me. They're struggling with addictions, and we're playing dominoes, which is just like the Puerto Rican official sport, right? Agreement? Yeah. And then they are playing soccer. And then I would get the awesome opportunity to go to the Amazon on mission, which I never would have thought. So we had to fly over there, and then we had to take a 20-hour boat ride, which of course we had to sleep in the hammocks. And then we arrived at the Amazon. I mean, this Amazon. So the Amazon people are river people. They use their boats to go from house to house. They bathe in the rivers. They're very simple people. It's very hot. It rains a lot. There's a lot of bugs. And I remember the first thing I heard when I arrived on the boat. Welcome to the malaria capital of Brazil. Had I known that, I would have gone back to do my motorcycle journey. And here's the huge mosquito nets, a lot of bug sprays. And this is the people we serve. Our mission was to share love as Christians. And this is some of the missionaries. And here's me making heart shapes, like teenage girls like to do. And this is me wearing bad makeup, like teenage girls like to do. There I was doing some theatrical show for the children. And then we would take them out and bang pots and just go around the village. We'd also get to visit prisons there, which are really, really horrible conditions. I don't know how they can really maintain that. And visit the hospitals, where you get people who are there because a lot of poisonous snakes have bitten them, and they have to stay there for 2 weeks or so. So then, I intended to be in Brazil 3 weeks, and I didn't know Portuguese, but by the end of it all, I was able to have intelligent conversational Portuguese, because when I was in this kind of environment, there was no English or Spanish option. I just had to learn through immersion. And it eventually got extended to 99 days, which happens to be 9 days more than my visa permitted. So I had trouble leaving the country unknowingly. And this is where you know the true measure of a man when he is in this kind of situation. Is he going to be brave or is he going to be a coward? And I was just begging for my life. Please don't do anything. I need to continue travel. Don't deport me. And I ended up having to pay a very small fine. But what I want to highlight is that 3 weeks extended into over 3 months. I visited over 12 cities, and the total cost of accommodations for my time in Brazil was $0. I was hosted every single night. Half the time I didn't even have to pay food. And I was moving. It was not like I was like trying to prove the world like I can stay for free. What I was really doing was that I was applying the key insight from the Camino. To be open not to what you want from the journey, but what the journey wants to give you. To be open to outcome. And in the process, I opened myself to what people can offer. Because fullness of life is found in giving up complete self-reliance so we can accept what others have to share. Yes, they shared with me their homes and I got to save money, but what was really valuable is how they shared their lives. Not just being polite, but really deep, in a deep way. And what I learned too was that I have my part to offer, and so do others. And when we allow this exchange to happen, we mutually enrich one another. So now it's 6 months into my journey, and then I go to Peru. This is the cathedral in Cusco, which Cusco used to be the capital of the Inca Empire in South America. This is local women on the market. Most of them actually speak Quechuan. Some of them can't even speak Spanish, so the language is still very alive in Peru, the traditional language. And this is the one and only site monument that I needed to see no matter what, Machu Picchu. I would go up to this mountain and get a bird's eye view of it too. This is me having fun. Just before we got kicked out, they were blowing the whistles, get out, get out. And I'm like, no, I need to make this picture work. And this video I'm going to show next is I actually got to go to the Amazon from Peru. And I want you to just listen to the kind of sounds that are there. Kind of neat, right? Yeah. What's not neat is when one of those things enters the cabin where you are, you're crying out to the people to help you. Now this kind and cute-looking hamsters, they're not pets. They're actually food. Now I did not eat them, but in Peru, they are food. This is a monastery I saw. And this is a boat ride I took, and I like the color of the water. So. Then I did pass through Chile and went to Easter Island, which was a really cool place to be, well known for these statues. And here I got to do the next level down motorcycle experience because I got to rent one for 3 days, and I had the time of my life traveling throughout the island. Not exactly 3 months going solo, but yeah, something better than nothing, right? And then I did not go on this boat, but I did cross the Pacific into New Zealand, and now we're getting to Christmas time. New Zealand has a lot of sheep. You can't believe it's quite an impressive sight. And another outcome of Camino connections, I could have been spending Christmas on my own, but because of a family that I hosted when I was serving in the Camino, this is what Christmas was for me. And then we got to go around in circles singing traditional New Zealand Christmas songs. I'm going to play it for you. Christmas, I wish you a Merry Christmas from the bottom of my heart. Feliz Navidad. That's from New Zealand, right? And this is where I spent New Year's, in this monastery for a week. It was the quietest New Year's of my life. Because the monks get up early, they go to sleep late, so there's no way they're going to stay up late for New Year's. Then I went to Brisbane, Australia, and I got to see a koala and kangaroos. And a few minutes after this photo was taken, I was holding the koala, and it decided to relieve itself on me. I know, it's funny, right? When a koala poops on someone who's not you. Then I visited this community, the large community. And this community is composed of people with and without disabilities, sharing life together in community. And what's very interesting is that they go away from the paradigm of this is the caretaker and the patient, the residents and the staff, and they are just family. When you go to the house, you see all the art, you see photos, they eat together, they pray together, they play, they care for each other. And I think it's very important because Large wants to tell us that sometimes when we think of people who are maybe limited or disabled in some way, we think, how am I going to help them? But Large tells us, it's come not to tell people what to do, not to teach them, come to meet the person for who they are and learn how they can enrich your life. And it's a place that cherishes diversity. I was talking with Danny here. This is Jenny, Danny, Sheena, and Peter. And Danny was telling me, oh, I have an intellectual disability, and he would continue in conversation. And what I thought was interesting is that he's not trying to hide it because there's no shame, because he's accepted and loved where he is. I remember after dinner, it's Sheena's regularly scheduled time to go around the table and touch people's hair. And that was quite fun, and I'm just going to show you how fun it can be. So she would go and she would place her hands on people's hair, and then we all start laughing. Are you having fun?
Yes, I am.
Yes? He's having fun. And then we would do that all over, and we would have the time of our lives for about 10 minutes. And what Lars wants to tell us is that systems of belief, be they secular or religious, make the world a better place only when they promote the dignity of all human beings. We're all different, and we shouldn't need to be afraid to meet one another. This is Danny. When I left Large Community, we were both going together because he was also going to the city. So we get to the train station. He already has his ticket. So I go get my ticket. And then when I look back, I see something that makes me very sad, because the people who walk around him, Danny makes faces and noises. So the people who walk around him, you can see that they're afraid of him. They give him the eye. They move away because they judge him for what they see and not for who he is. And that makes me very sad, because that is wrong. And that's not how we're called to behave. So if Brazil taught me to be open to what others have to offer, in Large, I learned to go beyond what others have to offer, deeper into their inherent value. Because fullness of life is found in looking beyond the usefulness of a human person and recognizing their inherent value. It is about recognizing them not for what they can do, but for who they are. Then I will go to Asia. I was very excited about Asia. It's so different. This is Hong Kong. It shows the modern Hong Kong, traditional Hong Kong. Then I went to India. And India, was very excited because the first thing I was going to do is I was going to go to a local traditional wedding. And here's a side. The weddings in India tend to last several days. They have parades, they have fireworks, they have face painting. And then this guy here is not the groom, but he is Deepak Patel, who's standing right here in the front, whom I massaged his hair earlier. How are you doing, Mr. Patel? Are we still friends? Okay. And he is the brother of the groom, and that's his, at the time, fiancé. But Deepak just got married 2 weeks ago, so congratulations. So I was very grateful that they welcomed me, into their environment to sleep, with them on the floor on tiny little mats, because all the family comes together in one house, so there's limited room. And I just loved it. This is a scene showing the dancing, which I got a lot of it. And people who know me know that I love dancing. And this is the groom and the bride during the ceremony. Now I want to show you a little video about it. Kind of neat, right? Then I traveled through northern India by my own, which I was very afraid to do in the beginning. This is a scene that shows like the poverty. This is a slum in Mumbai. It's famous because it was the slum featured in the movie Slumdog Millionaire. This is a monkey. Why do I show a monkey? Because India has a lot of roaming wild animals in the cities. Monkeys on the roofs, which they can take your snacks if you're not careful. There's a lot of cows by the streets, which create serious traffic problems. And goats tied to the posts. I didn't know that was going to rhyme, but it's pretty neat. And here's to show, I traveled for a few days with a local person, and this is how much they paid to get into this monument. This is how much I paid. So 5 rupees versus 100. But it doesn't bother me because 100 rupees is $1.35. This is some of the delicious food that I was taken to enjoy. Street food. Looks very healthy. Not good for your cholesterol. I took a cooking class and learned to make some Tibetan momos. That was fun. This is one of the opportunities that I got in India. India is the birthplace of many world religions. So I got to go to a lot of the holy sites of these world religions and learned a ton. Obviously, I got to go to a ton of Hindu temples like this one, which is from Deepak's village. And I also got to go to Varanasi, which is the holiest city for Hinduism, which is by the Ganges River. These are some Tibetan Buddhist monks. So you can see this. This is by the foothills of the Himalayas. So this is the place where the Tibetan government in exile resides. So the Dalai Lama lives there, and I found his residence, and I tried to get in, but they wouldn't let me. I don't know why. This is Bodh Gaya, is the place where Buddha attained enlightenment, and there were many Buddhist temples there I got to visit. And this is the Golden Temple in the northwest part of India, in Punjab. And this is the central place for Sikhism religion. I would spend many days around it and just talking with a guy who loved to debate and enter conversation, and we had the great of times. One thing in Sikhism, just outside of it, they have this place where they feed people 24/7. And you just go in, there's no payment or nothing, and they just have this streamlined system, and that's me over there eating. And it's pretty neat, how they take care of the people. This is a man from the Sikh religion in pilgrimage. He was not very happy I took this picture. No, he was okay. And that's me holding up the Taj Mahal. I promise you, it's worth seeing it. The postcard does not do it justice. It's quite majestic, if I were to use a word. And then after that, I went to Calcutta, India. Calcutta is a city that's overwhelmed with noise, pollution, and chaos. I remember after a few days when I was blowing my nose, it comes out black. And I went there to serve alongside the Missionaries of Charity, which are better known for their foundress, Mother Teresa of Calcutta. And Mother Teresa dedicated her life to serving the poor and the neglected on the streets of Calcutta, because she believed, even though she's called, yes, to relieve the suffering of the poor due to food, clothing, and shelter, she felt that the greatest suffering that these people had was that they were unwanted, uncared for, and unloved. So this is where I would serve. Men and women would be brought here from the streets of Calcutta. Some of them were taken by the hospital because they They saw them as having no hope. Others were found on the streets in conditions that would be fit like a beast, but definitely not human conditions. And all of the people there couldn't really take care of themselves, and many of them were dying. So it's a difficult emotional environment to be at. But in addition to working with the people, I also got to clean clothes. And that's me, being bothered by the sun. And one thing about me in that time is that a few days before arriving to Calcutta, I contracted a stomach parasite. Now, at first I thought it's just a stomach bug, but when you see that the symptoms persevere after days, you know you have to go to the hospital. And I got to Calcutta realizing this, and I was feeling kind of bad because I would think that I came here to help people, but I'm coming here to be helped now. But the sisters took good care of me in the first few days. And even though I was treated, the symptoms would persevere for a month. I also, because in India, I started traveling very fast, going from sites and seeing many places. I started getting exhausted. And I started to lose track of why I was traveling in the first place. And at this point in my life, in my travels, which is about 10 months in, I really started to miss home for the first time. It was so bad that at night, I would go on the internet and look up pictures of rice and beans and Puerto Rican dishes and fried plantains, because any little bit that would just give me consolations, I just needed it at the time. But I want to share this story. This is how the house looks from the inside. And the man who you see in front of the sisters, he started to get really, really bad condition. He was bedridden by the second week. This man was dying, and he was not old. He was probably in his 40s. The day after that picture was taken, he died. The day before, as I was doing my rounds, and I passed by him, and I sat down, see if he needs something, because even though now he wasn't able to eat, he's still throwing up every day. He's not able to talk anymore. And when I sit down, he extends his hands over and touches here. So I think one of the things we used to do for the patients there is that we would put lotion because they're ill, their skin gets so dry. So I'm like, okay, he wants me to do that. So I started putting lotion in his arm. And then after I was done, he put it again. But then he started gesturing as in a rubbing motion. So I get that he's trying to tell me, give me a massage. So I start doing it, and I have gloves at the time. So I start doing that. But then as I finish that, he keeps gesturing to other parts of the body. And then I realize what he's trying to tell me. He's trying to tell me, I am not a monster. I am a human being. Please touch me. And when I got that message, I took off my gloves and I started accepting every request he had about being massaged. And I massaged his whole body, which was psychologically very difficult in the beginning because his skin doesn't feel like our skin. It's not only dry and scaly, but you can feel all the details in the bones and the veins. So it made me very squeamish at first. But I would continue to massage him. And as I would massage the remainder of his body, I get to a point where I realize the pain that I'm having because of this stomach parasite I had, how I'm missing home, how I'm exhausted. And I realize that I also, in a ways, am poor like this man. Also, in a ways, am lacking. Because I realize that all the things that I believe make up my life that are added on, they can be taken up in an instant. Much like when I was diagnosed with cancer, even common things like breathing, sleeping were just limited. And I got to a point in admitting my own poverty that I felt I could identify with this man and be in solidarity with him. Because this man that was dying, to him, life meant more than just a morsel of food or one more sip of water. Life was about being identified as a human being, to be comforted and touched. Life is about more than just not being dead. That's why I believe fullness of life is found in moving away from our fears of those who are different so we can be with and even touch the most destitute. It is about having the courage to accept our brokenness and admit our poverty. I would then go to the South. And in the South, this is one of the moments of greatest joy, or one of the highlights of it, because from this place in India, I got to watch the GPM launch, which I was very excited about getting to. You can see I'm very excited and beaming about it. The people there couldn't believe that I actually worked for NASA. They were just thinking I was playing some kind of a hoax. And I didn't have my badge to prove it to them, so. Then I went to this monastery, and these 3 monks inspired me to start growing back my Camino beard again. They would also work making bread. They would put me to work to bake bread. They also have a dairy farm. I would help pick tomatoes. So they do a lot more than just pray. And these are some nuns enjoying ice cream on a Sunday. I also got a chance to learn to play sitar while I was in Mumbai. That's my instructor. And then I went to Malaysia. And this guy I met in India. And when I went to Malaysia, he made sure he showed me the best of Malaysia, which was the best street food in the world. And that's the Ramly burgers that we had as we toured street food. Then I went to Cambodia, visited the Angkor Wat complex, which is truly a wonder of the world. And then this is some floating villages that exist in Cambodia. And I met a priest, and he took me to where he goes on this boat ride. That's the Catholic church where he would serve Mass. And you can't really see, but there's a house here, and there's a lot of houses here that are just floating. And this is inside. So it's interesting to be in a religious service, and you're like swinging a little bit from side to side. Then after Cambodia, I went to South Korea. So now we're into the 11th month of my journey. South Korea is still at war with North Korea. And you could see in the South Korean metro stations how they have these supplies. Just in case there was an attack, people can go underground. And I had the opportunity to go to the South Korea-North Korea border. The building over there is North Korea, and this is the actual border. So if I were to cross that border, I would be dead right now. And people have died in the past few decades trying to cross that border. This is a South Korean soldier. He was very friendly. He did not speak. He did not move. He did not breathe. But he is a human being. I was very nervous. I would touch him, and then he would explode or something. So you can tell I'm tense. I'm not really laughing here from joy. It's just tension. Now, I would like to share the story, not my story, but the story of my grandfather. My grandfather, who's there, was a U.S. soldier in the 65th Infantry Regiment. And he was sent to South Korea for the Korean War in 1950. There's a story he would always tell us, because he said he was running after a battle. He was tired, and then he slipped and fell on the water. He tried to swim back, but the exhaustion, he just could never make it. And he would tell us that this would go on until he got to a point that he just gave up. He realized that's it, that's the end. And shortly after that thought came to his mind, someone jumped in the water, pulled him out, and it was this 12-year-old Korean boy who jumped in and risked his life to save my grandfather's life. So, knowing this, when I went to South Korea, I decided I want to find that river. So I asked my grandfather, and he remembers the name clearly. And I could find it. It's close to the North Korean border, but it's kind of in the middle of nowhere, so it would take me a long time to get there. And when I went there, I made sure I touched the water. I collected a little bit of these waters and sent it back to my family. And I was there to give thanks, to pay respect, to honor this young 12-year-old Korean boy who risked his life to save my grandfather's life. So I wrote this little note of thanksgiving, had it translated in Korean. I do not know how to write Korean. And I just let it by the river. Because if it was not for that young boy, not only me, but my whole family would not exist. Because this was before my grandfather was married to my grandmother. A few months after I was in Korea, I found out that my grandfather, from the infantry regiment he was in, which was a segregated group of mostly Puerto Ricans, they received the Congressional Gold Medal, which is the highest civilian award given to people. So here comes to our fifth stop, because I believe fullness of life is found in simply gratitude. I started this journey giving thanks for a second life I had been given, surviving my cancer. And now I found myself being grateful for my grandfather's life being given a second chance. And it was so interesting how I was in Korea and I had this strong connection to Korea, even though it's a different culture, different language, a different people. But because of, through gratitude, I feel like I could identify with people that weren't my own and events that happened even before I was born. So gratitude is a very powerful thing. So I want to take a few moments, and I'll do it myself. If we could all just, in our heads, think of a thing we are grateful for. Thank you. Oh. Then I continued through South Korea. You know how we have refrigerators here? Well, they have heat aerators. They actually keep your drinks warm. Hot drinks, just pick them up from the heat aerator. I've practiced Taekwondo for over 10 years. And Taekwondo is originally from South Korea, so I made sure that I find a dojo and I can train with them. And I actually talked to this guy and convinced him that I needed to do this, and he let me train with them. Now, this guy to the right, he felt it was important to show how superior Koreans are in Taekwondo. So I was left gasping for air more than once during the few hours that I spent there. This is a family that hosted me, and I don't know why I took pictures while they were washing the car instead of helping them. But I thought it's funny to show, just my perspective. Then I went, now we're in April, so this is into my last month. This is a Buddhist monastery I stayed in a few days. This is one of the monks, and we're having a tea ceremony. This is them praying at 4 in the morning. I can't believe I woke up for that. It's just difficult, but it was well worth it. This is Homer Simpson, enjoying Korean traditional treats. Then I went to Japan, and this is where I slept one night. I don't know if it felt more like sleeping in a space spot or a morgue, but you can see it's quite compact and strange, and you just get to close this. And then I finally achieved the dream that I had since I was a little boy, because I was able to perform Michael Jackson's Beat It in Japanese karaoke with costume. There is more to life than just not being dead. It's called Japanese karaoke. That's right. I'm sorry. So then we've come full circle. I'm back in Europe, and this is the last week of my journey. And I go to a small town called Taisei, a little small villages, and stay with a religious community, because for me, I felt like I needed a time to recollect, to reflect, to be with God, a time of retreat. Because this journey set me out to understand a little bit more about what it means to be human, When I was in the Camino, I learned that the journey exists not to give you what you want, but to give you what you need. So I learned to let go of having to control everything and be open to the outcome. Then I went to Brazil in the Camino, to Brazil, and there I went from being open to the outcome to now being open to what people have to offer, to what people have to share. Even if it's just ordinary things, it can be so powerful to know how we can mutually enrich one another. Then I was put to question that it's not just about what people have to offer, but you have to go deeper into the value of a person. So beyond what they can have to offer, recognize their inherent value for who they are, not what they can do. And then I went to what I believe is the deepest circle, which is that of poverty. In Calcutta, being able to identify with this man who was in the most destitute of conditions. Not because I felt pity for him, but because I felt like I could identify by recognizing my own poverty. And from that low point of view, I could look up, and everything that I've received in this journey feels like a gift. So I could look up in gratitude and be grateful for simple things, for second chances, for what we learn, what we experience. But there was still unresolved tension. Because when I look back, I do not only see the good things to be thankful for, but there were also a lot of things that went wrong. There were a lot of places where I failed, where I messed up. For example, I had this idea I have this budget, so as I travel, 10% of it, I'm going to be giving it away to people I find in need. But that never happened. I also had a lot of opportunities that I missed because I was either lazy, not willing to put the work or the sacrifice. And there were also a lot of people whom I just disregarded. So I get to a point where doubts start to creep in, and I start to wonder, did I really make the most out of this year? Because the year has ended, and I wonder, why am I not on the cover of Time magazine? But seriously. What did happen when I was here in this week is that I came to a point of resolution, because I was able to look at my fallen humanity, how I failed not only through this journey, but also through life, through my pride, my selfishness, my impatience, and my demanding nature. Because if we deny our weakness and the reality of death, if we pretend that we have to be strong and powerful always, we are going to deny the important self of who we are. Because fullness of life is found in embracing that guy. The guy who has bad days, the guy who messes up, the guy who gets grouchy. Because we all kind of have that guy in us, and we should not ignore it. We should really embrace him and love him or her. And in more eloquent terms, didn't show it right. Fullness of life is found in accepting who we are, a mixture of strength and weakness. It is about embracing our humanity in truth, in the truth of who we're called to be. So I set out in the pursuit of life to the fullest for a year, and I shared with you places where I believe I found fullness of life. Yet a question remains: how can we recognize it in our lives? Well, you've heard it say, you recognize a tree by its fruits. And I believe that the fruit of fullness of life is found in our capacity to give life to others. It means to give of ourselves and to lay down our lives for the sake of others. Fullness of life is ultimately life-giving. Because when a person has a life-giving exchange with another, the one on the receiving end perceives the truth about who they are and where they are going in such a way that that person doesn't leave the same again. Because fullness of life is not about leaving an impression or making an impression. It is about bringing transformation. And as I traveled the whole world, this became the most powerful, fulfilling aspect of my whole year. Witnessing how I experience new life in myself and also how others receive new life. And why does this matter? Why does this matter? How is it relevant to us? Because I think deep down inside, if we all look down, especially if we can look down below certain facades we might hold, we will find that we also have this thirst for life. And not just getting by in life, but really a fulfilling life, a meaningful life, not one driven by anxiety or emptiness. And I think sometimes we have this thirst, and we kind of look at it in the wrong places. Because we look at our relationships, our work, at our popularity, at what we have, our money, and we say, oh, what I need is more friends, more relationships. What I need is more work, more accomplishments. What I need is more money. But the answer is not in more. Because I went and traveled the world, and fullness of life was not in the journey itself, but it was already in me. I have come so that you may have life, life in all its fullness. These were the words that guided me on my sabbatical. But I am not here to give you answers, because this was not a story about getting the right answers. This was a story about pursuit. Because for a year, I set out to meet the world as it is, to experience life and what it has to offer, to explore the questions that were important to me, and also to the point that even challenged my assumptions and my identity. So I ask you, what are the questions that are important to you? What are those questions that create a tension in you, much like I had tension in me after having gone through cancer? And find those questions and let them compel you to pursue your personal journey. Because there is one reality you all must face. One day, you are going to die. Until that day, will you pursue life to the fullest? Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Dan. Sure. Sit down.
We still have a few more minutes. If anyone has any non-philosophical questions, logistical questions,
Yeah, thank you.
it's really hard to say anything after that. But if there's anything anyone would like to ask Juan about how we managed to pull this off, or anything else. Do you mind just, yes?
All right, come on.
My question is for Juan. You mentioned that Machu Picchu was the one place you had to see. Why?
I guess just being drawn to the culture and just seeing, wow, how this South American culture achieved this, and how it was kind of like in the middle of nowhere in the mountain. It was just really a personal preference. There was no deep emotional or personal attachment to it. I just thought it would be a worthwhile accomplishment. So.
How was it like adapting back to work?
Okay.
The question was, how is it like adapting back to work?
Yes. So many people ask me that. They're like, Juan, how do you adapt to work after being a year? You're crazy. I don't know how you can do this. But I think going back to one of the lessons I shared, in becoming reconciled with my own humanity, I could look at the year and look at what was and what wasn't. Be thankful, put a little ribbon on it, complete it, and kind of move on. So I don't stay there. I kind of knew I had to move on and be present here right now. And another thing is that as I'm traveling, I'm being challenged a lot to change, to adapt. And I had to adapt to a lot of dramatic changes. So coming back home is just adapting again. So something that I was practicing all throughout.
Was it hard to adapt back, or was it nice to be back?
It was nice. It was nice. I got back and I'm like, wow, nothing's changed. Well, there was one thing that changed. I remember going to the kitchen and one of the employees came out and said, Juan, the coffee club has been disbanded. I'm like, is that all? a year, and the coffee club has been disbanded. So it was good. It was good. I mean, I felt very much welcomed, and it was good to be back and say hi to the people. Never in my mind was I kind of like wishing I would be back out. More questions?
Will you do it again?
Would I do it again? The simple answer to that, yes, if I feel God calls me to it. I think that this could have been a great travel experience, but for me personally, having God as my companion, it became the journey and the adventure of a lifetime. And I wouldn't do it without Him, if I were to say. So. Over there.
Would you give any practical or logistical advice, any lessons you learned in a more practical way of traveling all around like that?
Do you want about preparing for doing that, or while I'm there?
I guess both. Anything.
Okay. I would say pack light. One of the lessons from the Camino, there were many. I could actually have spoken just about the Camino and filled up an hour or more. And one of the lessons that I learned really quick is that I had that big red backpack, and the first day I was out walking the Camino, within 30 minutes, I couldn't bear the pain. And I was like, if this is how it feels after 15, 30 minutes, how can I actually walk 1,000 kilometers? So I actually had to learn to let go of some things that I had, just release them and just go back down to essentials. And then sometimes it doesn't even fit in places if you pack too much. So I think that's one thing. Pack light, which means you won't have many clothes, which means you probably should learn how to hand wash clothes, because you're going to be doing that more than once a week. And I would say look up online, because one aspect I didn't tell is that I did some research. I looked at people who had done something like this, mostly through books or online, so you get a lot of the details about it. So, and I would share more if you have questions afterwards about it, because this answer can get very long, but thank you.
Prepare the trip also, because not just preparing the trip itself, where the places you're going to go, but also preparing with respect to the job itself.
With respect to the job, you're saying just in life.
The question is, how far in advance did you begin preparing for this trip?
Okay, so in 2010, I had an opportunity to travel internationally for the first time since I started working at NASA. And that was like a wake-up call of, let me explore this. I went to Asia. So I would say 2011 was a year that I philosophically had to justify it. Because since I felt like I had responsibilities, I wasn't no longer a college student. How do you justify leaving those responsibilities, the people, the job? So there was a year of just finding that inner conviction, that why to do this. And in the end, I found out that if I didn't do it, it would actually be more irresponsible for me and for those around me, because I would see that I would almost miss out on having the opportunity to enrich not only my life or others. So that was 1 year. Then I spent a year on the practical details, which I quickly realized that you can't go too much into it because it's so overwhelming. So you kind of have to leave an element of openness. For example, I didn't know where I was going to stay. I sort of budgeted some money and the route. And I think, does that answer your question, or was there a second part?
The second part was with work. How much did you tell it?
Okay, so how much in advance?
What was your reaction?
Well, the day before I left. No, I had, after about almost the 2-year mark of really thinking about this, and planning the practical details to see if it was feasible, I approached my supervisor, but I made sure I selected a key time. So I went during Christmas time. Everyone's happy and jolly. Oh yeah, time off. So I went just before Christmas, relaxed time, and it went very well. So, and the other thing that was really important is I was very committed to the GPM project, and it was specifically timed to the point where I would end my responsibilities with GPM project. Because to me, it was important to take a project from the moment I started all the way through completion as far as I was capable or asked to do. So that was another key aspect, making sure I completed what my responsibilities were at work. Thank you.
Juan, were you concerned at all for your
And then you.
safety? Were you concerned at all for your safety? I mean, you've been gone for a whole month. You're a
Yeah.
single person traveling through all these different countries. Were you concerned about your safety at all?
Well, that changed. I remember when the first place I went to was in Spain. And I was staying there with my cousin the first few days before the Camino. And I was so paranoid that I would have all these safety things to make sure I wasn't mugged. I had safety pins that I would close my pockets so no one could put their hands into. And I was putting my backpack. It was like extreme paranoia, even though I was in a fairly safe place. As the months passed, I would just leave stuff. I could be in strange places and I just didn't care because I felt like I developed an intuition or a heightened sense of awareness for when a condition might be, I have to be careful or not. So that was pretty neat to see that. A scary thing that I lived was, there was actually in Peru, when I was going to the Amazon overnight bus, there was a lot of rain, so there was this rock slide, and it took out half the road. But we were driving overnight, and what I know is that it stops, it's 3 in the morning, and I had recently heard how in Peru it's very common for buses to get hijacked. So I started panicking. We're getting hijacked, people are coming in and out, and I try to hide, and I'm like, where do I put my cell phone? Because that's my pictures and my GPS and all that. And I had taken Dramamine, you know what Dramamine is? To help with dizziness. So I was panicking, I was a little woozy. Eventually I just fell asleep again, not having found a place for my cell phone. And then I woke up at dusk, at sunup, and found out that there was it took out half the road. It was kind of scary. Yeah.
Last question, Juan?
Here.
Yeah, I just want to, first of all, thank you for sharing your journey with us. I think it's been awesome, and I know that you could be talking to us the whole day if we keep asking you questions. But as you share the journey, there was a lot about yourself, journey, and then the connections that you made. And the question is, have you been able to keep in touch with your connections?
Yeah, most definitely. There's the host that on the Camino, where I stayed and served as a pilgrim first, and then also as a host. I call him every few months, and he's like a mentor now. So it's very wonderful. And the same with people in Asia, in Brazil, a lot of people in Brazil. You can imagine from the focus on the people, there's a lot of people in Brazil and Europe. Yeah, so there's definitely connections that are maintained, and it's very, very rewarding.
Just wrapping up, Juan, I'm in awe, and I'm sure a lot of people are as well. I'm in awe of your story, I'm in awe of your journey, I'm in awe of you as a person. So I just want to really thank you for sharing your story and sharing yourself with all of us at NASA Goddard. We're really lucky to have you here, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
I'll do that.